Alright, today we're going to learn how to use buttons in Animate. You should know some of the basics of Animate before you go and do buttons. So I'm going to fly through some aspects, but I'll break it down for the button bits. So firstly, you need to open up Adobe Animate. And it should come up with a window like this. If you're in 2019, it should say like HD, standard view, or that. You can just use the HD view. But for 2018 and before, you're going to use ActionScript 3.0. So you should have a screen similar to this. Now I like to work in classic mode, just so I can see my timeline, my tools, my properties, my library, and my main scene in the middle. Alright. So firstly, what we're going to do, we're going to create our first button. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to name this layer button. Alright. I'm going to use a rectangle. I'm going to get rid of the border because the border is really annoying to work with. I'm going to choose a color. I'm going to choose, I don't mind the blue. Use the blue. And just create one big square. Alright, once you've made your box, you're going to go get the text tool. You're going to click in here and type in the word start. Now mine's already to the size because I've done it before. But all you need to do, say if it's in that blue color, double click it, change the color in the properties, then use your transform tool to make the box bigger. Then come back and change the size of the font. So I'd use 67, but that's up to you what you want. Now if I wanted to align my text with my box in the center, come into the align tool. I'm just going to write center, click on the horizontal center and vertical center, and if I click back out, so notice that my text disappeared, but when I click back out it came back, and now my text is actually in the center of that box. Alright, now we need to make this into a button. So what we're going to do, we're going to highlight the whole thing, right click it, and then choose convert to symbol. I'm going to name this button my start button, just like this, or lowercase. I think it works better. I don't know why capitals have issues, but that could be due to coding later on. But name it the same, so then you know what it is. Then I'm going to change the type to a button because we're working with a button. Don't worry about any of the advanced features. We don't need to look at those. That's just too much for what you need. Press OK once you've done. And now this is turned into a button. But before we can start doing any coding or doing anything else with our buttons, we need to change our instant name. This is what's going to show up in your code. So you need to make sure that this has an instant name. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to find it. Sometimes errors occur in the coding as well. So I'm going to name it exactly what I named the symbol, just so then it's all the same and I know what it is. So I'm going to name it star_button. All right, now we have a button. But at the moment, if we press play, so Control Enter on Windows or Command Enter on Macs, we notice that nothing happens, but we do get the mouse that shows that it can click. Alright, so I'm going to make my animation go for, I don't know, a second. I'm going to insert a keyframe and make it a second long. So at this keyframe something finishes, which will be the button's finished. So in this instance, I could move this button over here and have it land there, and I can make a classic tween to make my button move if I wanted to do something like that. And notice that looping effect is happening on our animation, and we can fix that in a minute to stop it. So now what we're going to do, we're going to open up a new layer, and we're going to name this actions. So this is where all your actions are going to occur. So the actions are your code. So this is where you're going to actually use code to tell the animation to do certain things. Now, what I want to do now is open up two different windows that we don't have yet on our timeline or in our view. I'm going to go Window, and we're going to go Actions. And it comes up with this little window here. What we're going to do is we're going to click on this tab and drag it into our timeline. Till it's blue, and then it'll click in. So now I have it paired with my timeline and actions. This is just easier because you're going to flick through both of those at all times. So with a floating window, it just doesn't work as easy. The other thing that you need to open up is code snippets. Now, code snippets allows you to not have to remember all the coding. So code snippets is just a preconceived coding that Animate has created, and we're going to use those to help us animate some stuff. So we're only going to use some basic ones, but in action scripts, timeline, and we're pretty much going to be using click to go to scene to play and play today. So that's the main one we're going to use, but you notice that there's a lot of other ones that we can use. If we want to do a more advanced kind of animation, you can start looking at these. But for what you need to do, we only need to go to timeline navigation and click to go to scene and play. All right. What we're going to do now, we're actually going to start adding code to our button or this animation. So firstly, in our actions, we're going to go to that last keyframe that we just made. So when the button stops there, we're going to insert a keyframe. So now we have a blank keyframe sitting there. And what we're going to do, we're going to click on that keyframe and go into our actions. In our actions timeline, it tells us what frame we're working in. So where it says 24, that we're working in the 24th frame right here. And line 1 means that's where the code is line 1. Actions is the layer. So what we're going to do first, we're going to add a little bit of code. We're going to do stop. So stop, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. So what this will do, when I play the animation, this will stop the looping effect. So notice now that it doesn't keep repeating, it's slid in and stopped. So that's great, that's what we wanted first. And if we go back to our timeline, you notice that now on that keyframe, it's got a little A on top of the animation, the keyframe to say that there is code attached to it. So that's our first bit of animation and a bit of coding. So firstly, we got our stop. Now what we're going to do, we're going to make our button click to a different scene. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back to our actions. Make sure we click on that keyframe first. Go to actions and say we want to work on the 24th frame. But this time, we're going to click on the button. And now it says button 24. So okay, we're still working in the 24th frame, but we're working with the button this time. This time we're going to go to our code snippets. And we're going to go click to go to scene and play. So we're going to double click that. And it's come up with all this information. And you notice that it's added to your actions layer. We would rather have all the code in one place. So that's why I've built the action layer, so that you know that all your coding is in one spot. You can go into it and edit it all into that one spot. Rather than having all buttons having their own separate codes, that's when it can get clunky and that's when it can get messy. So having it all in that actions layer is very important. So now let's go through this code a little bit. Where you see these forward slashes and backslashes and asterisks, anything in between that is just information about that code. So we're talking about click to go to scene and play. Clicking on the specified symbol instant plays the movie from the specified scene and frame. Instructions: replace scene 3 with the name of the scene you would like to play. Replace 1 with the frame number you would like the movie to play from in the specified scene. So all that's just telling you is that when we click on this button, we're going to go to a different scene and play whatever that animation is. And at the moment, we don't have another animation to go to, but we'll make that in a second. So I'm going to get rid of this information because we really don't need it. It's good for referencing at the start, but otherwise it's pointless. So you notice now that we have a little bit of code in our animation or our actions layer. So notice that our start button, that's our instance name. That's why we named it our instance. Well, that's why we named it. So we can reference it. Okay, so this is for our start button. So this is talking about when the mouse clicks on top of that button, what's going to happen. We're going to go play this movie. We're going to make it a movie clip and play whatever. Well, at the moment it says scene 3, frame 1. But we don't have a scene 3 at the moment. And we will make a scene 2 and we'll change this a little bit later. So if I play this now, it will come up and actually have an error because no scene was found. So that's all that's saying, is because we don't actually have a scene. So if we go back, we've done our first instance of coding. Now what we're going to do, we're going to add a scene 2. So if we go to our scenes, to my view by just going window scene. You notice that we only have one scene, and that's the scene that we're working in right now. Previously, we've been working in multiple different projects, so new Animate files. Now we're going to start working in a single Animate file, but with multiple scenes. It's sort of like our layers in Photoshop, sort of like our layers in Illustrator. It's just multiple different pages, I would say. So we're going to go to scene 1 down here on the bottom, just like any layers or anything else in any other Adobe program. We just click Add Scene. So now it's come up with a new timeline, new scene in here, but this time it's called Scene 2. Now we're going to go back to Scene 1. So notice that we still have Scene 1, nothing has been deleted. We can go back to our actions. I'm going to click on the keyframe, go to actions. This time we can actually reference where to go. So where it says scene 3, we're going to change that to scene 2 because we are working in scene 2 here. We actually have a scene 2 now. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the first frame. And when I press play, you'll notice that we'll press play, the animation will happen, the button will stop, we'll click on the button, and then it'll go to a white screen. But we'll have no errors this time, like this. We won't have this error. So if I press play now, notice the error area, we have none at the moment. We click on that, it goes to a white screen, but because it's only one frame and nothing happens, it restarts the animation straight away. But notice we have no errors. So it is referencing scene 2 at the moment. So that's good. So now we're going to actually add some animation to scene 2. So we can notice the difference. We can actually get the button working and we can have the button restart as well. So we can have the whole thing going through a loop. So what we're going to do, I'm going to do a quick morphing. So you would have done this practice before. So what we're going to start with, I'm going to start with a circle. That's black. Do it in here. And then at 1 second, I'm going to insert another keyframe. This time I'm going to add a square that is green. Make sure it's a square, not a rectangle. And then I'm going to delete the circle. This is all previously done in that morphing exercise we've done. I'm just recreating the same thing. So this time I'm going to do a polygon. Going to move it there. Get rid of it. Notice that I've done something wrong already. I need to add a new keyframe. Now I'll do the polygon. Get rid of our square. And then I'm going to try to go back to our circle. Or I will go back to our circle here. Then in between, again, did the same thing. I need to put a new keyframe. I'm going ahead of myself. So I'm going to make that go like that. And then in between, I'm going to do my shape tweens. Right click shape tweens so I can get that full animation. Notice how I did not get rid of the polygon, so I'm going to get that and delete that. So now if I press play, we go to our button, click start, it does our morphing, but then keeps going. So now what we're going to do, so I'm just going to say enable this morphing. This time we're going to add a new layer. Same thing as like scene 1, we're going to do an actions layer. So all our coding is in one spot. Now I'm going to insert a keyframe on that last keyframe and make sure we click it. And I'm going to do the same thing again as that I did in scene 1, and I'm going to name it stop. So then it stops on that final circle and pauses there. Now notice on our left over here, we have scene 1 actions. That's where our codes for actions in scene 1 are, and that's where our code is for scene 2 actions. Now if I play it, we'll get our button, hover over it, click on it, goes into our morphing, and then stops. Awesome. But now I want to create a button that goes from that ending of that morphing back to scene 1 so we can start all over again. So what we're going to do, we're going to add a new button. So I'm going to call this one, let's just call it button 2 in here, but it doesn't matter. And now I'm going to create a new button. I'm going to make another square. I'm going to make it, I don't know, yellow this time. Get a text tool, type in restart. Text is too big, so I'm going to go highlight it all, go to my properties, change that to blank, change the size of it, and drag that there, and then I'm going to align both of them to the center. All right. So now I've got that. I need to make it into a symbol. Name it restart underscore button, so I know what button it is. This is specifically my restart button. Press OK. Need to change my instant name to restart underscore button. Same as my symbol, so it's not confusing. And we have another button. Now, at the moment, if I play my animation, the restart button is at the start, and I don't want it there. I want it to show up once it's finished. So what I'm going to do is going to click that keyframe and click and drag it all the way to the end. So now my button only shows up right at the end. All right, now we're going to go back to our actions. So if we go back on our actions layer, frame 72 is the one that we're working with. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to add code for my restart button. So I'm going to click on my button. Notice that we're button underscore 2, so that we're working on the restart button. And then we're going to go to code snippets, double click that. Remember, all of this we can get rid of. But notice how I'm working in scene 2 actions, not scene 1 actions. This time we have our restart button. Awesome. That's just telling it what happens when you click it. But this time we're going to go back to scene 1, frame 1, so that we can restart this whole animation. So we got this button going to scene 2, frame 1, and this button to go back to scene 1, frame 1. So if I play this animation now, cool, button slides in, I'm going to hover my mouse over it, click it, we go into a morphing, stops, restart button shows up, click it, our animation restarts again. So that's really the basics of button pressing, or working with buttons. So the main points are that we're looking at symbols, we're looking at instant names, making sure that we name them, we're looking at our actions layer, using code snippets to give out the codes, making sure that we're working in scenes and making sure that we label our scenes correctly, making sure we do that. But then there's also one more thing that I'm going to show you, just a little bit more, making them look more like buttons. So let's get back to scene 1. We got our button here, we got it finished, we go, okay, I'm happy with how it animates in, it clicks, it works, etc, etc. Now this time I'm going to double click on my button, and it's going to come up with this window in the timeline. So up, over, down, hit. Now the two that you're going to look at are up, over and down. So over meaning when the mouse is hovering over it, it does something, and down when we click it, something happens. Hit's more for collisions, and up is our generic. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm going to click on the over, I'm going to insert a keyframe, and I'm going to go to my properties. Actually, no, I'm going to go to my colors, sorry. I'm going to change the color to green, make sure that the text is still readable. So I'll make that blank. So now if I play it, if I hover over it, the button changes color. All right, so that's our first one. Now I'm going to add one that does when I click it. So I'm going to insert another keyframe on the down. This time I'm going to change the color to be, I don't know, pink. Let's just say pink. I'm going to leave it black. So now if I go over it, okay, press play, I hover over it, the button changes color. If I click it, it changes it to another color. And then when I let go, it goes back into this. And then I can restart. And I can add the same similar stuff to that restart. Now I'm going to add one more thing to our restart button that's slightly different. So now you don't have to have the same button coming through. And I'll show you what I mean. So if you click this arrow, you can go back to your main scenes. So now I'm going to go back to my scene 2. I'm going to double click my restart. And this time when I hover over it, so I'm going to use over, I want it to say, are you sure? So firstly, I'm going to change the name. Say, are you sure? Now it's a bit big, so I'm going to resize that down. And then I'm going to change the color, of course, because let's just do it. Make sure that someone can read it. So are you sure? I'm going to align those two. All right, are you sure? So whenever I hover over, it's going to say, are you sure? Restart, are you sure? And then I'm going to say when I hit down, I'm going to insert a keyframe. I'm going to get rid of this whole button. I'm going to do a new one. I'm going to do a circle, say. That's red. Big circle about there. And then I'm going to type in, okay, with exclamation mark. Make sure it's really excited. Going, oh, okay, he really wants to restart his animation. So I'm going to click both of those and align both of those. Okay, so now if I press the animation, got the animation swirling in, hover over it, it changes color, click on it, it would have changed color, but you just didn't see it because I did it too quickly. Then now if it says restart, you hover over it, it says, are you sure? Then if I click down, it says, okay, and then it goes back to the start. Hover over, click down, change the color, goes, restart, are you sure? Click down, okay, and then it restarts. So that's the basics of buttons. A bit more practice, a bit more, you can look into a little bit more stuff if you really want to, but that's probably all you need really for buttons. You can make the designs a lot better with more time and refinement, but overall, that's just buttons in Animate.